Hi everyone, Caroline Zamora, Chief Deputy County Clerk here, and welcome to the Preserving History and Democracy podcast. Thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. I hope that you subscribe and like all those buttons on all the social medias. I want to go ahead and thank Jacob Schaublin, who is our producer, recorder, editor extraordinaire. He's behind camera today. He makes all of this happen. We don't get this done without Jacob. I also want to thank Cynthia Mendoza and introduce her. She's our communications coordinator. She gets everything scheduled for us. Again, we don't make this happen without Cynthia. And I also want to introduce and welcome Bern, our producer, researcher extraordinaire, doing awesome things for our office. So today we have a very, very special guest who's a returning guest. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Bern, who's going to introduce her.
Thank you so much. Today we have Teddie Moreno from NMSU with us today. Thank you so much, Teddie, for coming and sharing the story with us again.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself? I know we've had you on here previously, but for those viewers who maybe didn't watch that episode, can you tell us about yourself?
So I've been working in the archives for at least 12 years, maybe 10 years, 11, 12. I don't know. I lost count.
Yeah.
But it seems like I've been there forever just because I've gotten to know so much about the collections and about our researchers. But every day you learn something new, so it's not like I'm done learning and about our collections. But I worked at the public library, Brannigan Library, for 16 years before being here in the archives. And I cannot imagine doing anything different but the archives. It's really fulfilling. It's you learn so much and you become attached to the people's collections that you're processing, right. Which you'll see that with me in the other podcasts, fall in love with these people.
So I have to say, like, the last episode that you did, I wasn't there, but listening to it was so much fun. I thought it was so interesting because you have no idea.
11, 12-year-old
these
boys, they were struck by lightning, and they
mortuary, and like all that information was just so fascinating to me because it tells the story of folks and how they died, and it was a really beautiful, and how they lived, absolutely. And so it was just a really, really fun episode.
Yeah, I'm sorry you missed it because you were the one who were so excited about
I know.
We've had some really cool topics with you before, so we're excited to discuss this topic. Can you tell us a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today?
Sure. So when I was here, one of the episodes, I think it was in season 3, I discussed Jacob Schaublin, and you guys asked how I found out about him, and so I brought up the death records, and that turned into another podcast. But the death records, I remember turning the book, and I just flipped it open, and it landed to the page with Aminda Lohman on it, and that
it just happened to be
her page.
Wow.
Yeah, and it just set me on a 4.5 on and off again research project. Just working, trying to discover who this family was because she did not have that she was a widow of Martin Lohman. So, but I recognized the name and wondered, and from there it just took off, and I haven't stopped researching them.
So let's focus on Martin Lohman for a moment.
Okay.
What kind of education did he obtain?
So Martin came from a pretty well-to-do family in Missouri, and he went to a college. I think it was called the Jones College Community College. I don't think it was a community college, but it had community was in the title. It was a private school, and I believe his brothers also attended. And when he attended, he learned. They were teaching him bookkeeping and math, and when he graduated from there, he went on to attend the St. Louis, Missouri College or University, and he again studied in business, and he learned something called double accounting. I don't know if you're familiar with that term.
No.
I'm not. I'm going to have to look it up sometime. But I don't know if that means like cooking the books or what. But he learned something called double accounting, and I mean that was a kind of a major thing, I guess, back then. And he learned a lot of business skills, and I think he also became fluent in. He was already German speaking, but I think he became fluent in Spanish somewhere before he came to New Mexico. And he came to New Mexico when he was only 22 years old.
Young man
Yes. Yeah.
with a bright future.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when did he come to Las Cruces, and what did he do for work here?
So he came about 1876, and like I said, he was only 22 years old. He came to work for Lazinski and Company, and I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but he worked for two brothers, and he worked in their store for quite a while, and he met a clerk there named Numa Raymond, and Raymond Street is named after this gentleman. So he worked with him as they were both clerking, and eventually they decided to buy out the Lazinskis, and when they worked together, they were very successful. They were good friends. They were successful. Martin was a bachelor. I don't think Numa was married at that time to Katie Raymond, but eventually Martin bought out Numa, and so Martin was the sole owner of that. And from there, his business just took off. He was very successful. He was one of the most eligible bachelors. Everybody wanted him for their daughters, and he was really pretty handsome. Can I show you a picture?
Yes, sure.
Okay. He was actually pretty handsome, and when I first saw the photo of him, I thought he was I thought that was gray hair, but I'm beginning to think it was probably blonde.
Ah, he's a good catch.
Yeah, he was. He was rich and handsome.
You know, this look is coming back.
Yeah.
The mustache.
Yeah, that
Noticed.
mustache,
Okay.
Yes.
Nice.
So everybody was interested in him because of his wealth and his good looks, and he seemed to have a pretty good head on his shoulders as far as, things that were happening in the community, and he wanted to help improve the community. And he became friends with Jacob Schaublin.
Cool.
Yeah, they worked together to get the college started.
Oh,
Wow.
interesting. Okay.
Pretty cool.
I love that they valued education so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially since it didn't seem like Jacob had an education.
Where do you think that Aminda and Martin met?
There's really not any specific newspaper article that says, oh, these two bumped into each other and it was love at first sight. But what I do notice is that Aminda is in charge of a lot of, and I mentioned in a previous podcast that her and her sister are kind of the bells of the balls. They're blonde, they're beautiful, they, have pretty light green eyes, and they seem to be, very familiar with Spanish speaking also, and German and English. And so they are in charge of a lot of projects, church projects, community projects. They're singing, and eventually I start seeing in the paper, Aminda Schaublin and Martin Lohman and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And their names start to become connected, although it never says
Right.
he escorted her or they're together. So, but I assume it happened fairly soon, maybe after the college was started in 1882, because Jacob Schaublin and Martin were good friends. They worked together, and I think they just saw each other so often that they fell in love. And I have a photo of Aminda.
Oh.
This photo I was so happy to get. It's actually a photocopy that I enhanced with AI, her face, to bring it out, because it was a small file that I received from the descendants of Jacob Schaublin. They sent me it, but all they had was a photocopy of it. But I enhanced her facial image with AI just to bring it out, and I was astounded at her because she
is beautiful.
She's very pretty. She's
Yeah.
very pretty. So they ended up getting married in 1888, and I have just a little sample of their wedding announcement. It's not.
That's the year the college started.
Did I say 1888?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, this is so pretty. This is beautiful.
It's even prettier in real life because it's embossed. It's
wow.
I believe there's a gilded edge on one side. It's just
gosh.
so elaborate that I think they must have planned their wedding for a while, even though their announcement only came out maybe a week or two before the wedding, in the paper. Right. They must have been planning it for a while, or they had some quick printers.
Yeah. But also, I'm assuming, so this was embossed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. I was like, I wonder if someone like hand wrote it, but if it was embossed.
Well, the top where the flowers are was embossed.
Okay, so I wonder if someone like hand wrote each one.
It might have been, because I see that some of these like invitations that or little posters that were made, some of these look like they were hand calligraphied. So
And you see in the vault, some of the old documents have the most beautiful handwriting.
Yeah, they're so intricate.
It's possible.
yeah.
So it reads, Mr. and Mrs. J. Schaublin request the pleasure of your company at the marriage of their daughter Aminda to Martin Lohman on Thursday, September 18th, 1888. Reception at Commercial Hotel Hall at 9 o'clock. I'm assuming this means morning. .mo means morning. Martin Lohman and Aminda Schaublin.
Oh, cool.
Very
Beautiful.
cool.
So, and we have the original, a copy, we have the original in the Amador papers of all things. The Amadors were invited, and so my understanding is that the girls were friends, and so the Amadors have a copy of that. Well, they have the original, and that's where that was
That's so
scanned.
cool.
Very cool.
Yeah, I was really happy. One of my coworkers said, "Hey, I found this in the Amador collection. Just grab it away. Anything Schaublin I want, and they know it."
You're the Schaublin lady. Huh?
Yes. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about their story.
So Aminda and Martin, they go through a lot of different trials, and one of them is like we all do, family situations, things happening in our family. Let's see. When Emily has after they get married, Emily and her sister are both pregnant at the same time.
Oh.
And I didn't realize that until I started talking with the Conway family, which shout out to Laverne Conway and Aaron Van Zant. They're descendants of Emily Conway, Emily Schaublin, who marries Cable Conway from Silver City. They're descendants of him.
Wow.
And so, I reached out to them through Ancestry, and was so happy that they shared they shared photos that they had and photocopies of some that they didn't have but other relatives had. So, but I didn't realize that Emily had her baby the same time that Aminda did. In fact, they had their babies 18 days apart.
Wow.
Yeah, so they were both pregnant at the same time. And I want to show you a picture of Emily, and this is Emily. This is Aminda's youngest sister, and that's a daughter of Jacob and Bertha Schaublin.
She looks like Aminda.
Yeah.
Don't they kind of look? I was thinking of that.
I kind of wondered if it was Aminda, like maybe they made a mistake. And that is Cable Conway, and I apologize for the color. That's the way it came out. It's not my printer. There was nothing wrong with the printer. That's just the way the photo was sent to me, and
This is coming back too, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Emily Stiles,
Yeah.
just come back.
So I'm not really sure what Cable did for a living. I know Emily was very popular also, like I said, Aminda was, but when they get married, they moved to Edie County. And so she's over there having her baby, and Aminda's here having her baby. And Martin Lohman's family his parents come, and they come. I noticed in the paper it says something about Martin Lohman's parents were here visiting, but they don't mention the baby or anything. They just say that they're here visiting, and I put two and two together. Oh, they must have been here to help her with the baby. And then later on, I read that the Schaublins are heading to Edie County, and I forget the city that they were in. It wasn't Carlsbad. I don't remember, but they were heading over there. Maybe it was Carrizozo, but they were heading over there. So I'm thinking, okay, so one parent was here, one side of the family was here, the other side was helping the other daughter with the baby. But they had a son named Herbert in 1891, and this is a photo, and they sent me the photocopy on the right, and I had to do an enhancement with AI for the face to get his face a little more clear.
You did really well.
Thank you.
Really
Thank you.
well.
It
Beautiful
wasn't me.
baby.
It was AI. He was so cute.
Yeah.
He was really
So again,
cute.
this was Emily's.
This is Aminda's baby.
Aminda's and Martin's baby.
Yes, yeah. Their names are so similar. In fact, sometimes they call them Amelia, and I'm not sure which one is because later on I find out an article, and I put it in my timeline, that Amelia was attending something with Martin, but it couldn't have been her because she had already passed away. So, I mean, but it's funny, they call her Amelia sometimes, so, and they call Emily Amelia at other times.
Oh, wow.
In the paper. It's the paper who's getting it wrong, not the family.
Right.
So,
Oh, how cute.
And I saw her listed as Amanda in some documents.
yes, sometimes she's
Yeah.
listed as Amanda. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, is that the same person, or did another Lohman marry an Amanda?
It's her.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes they couldn't read the fancy handwriting or
Right.
whatever, but she did get called Amanda. And I saw her one time listed as Amonda. Amonda.
Oh,
Yeah. I was like, that's not pretty.
they're just making it up as they
yeah,
go.
that's not pretty.
So tell us about Herbert.
So Herbert, as you can see, was a beautiful little baby, but at some point, and I mentioned this, that Aminda and Martin are attending a lot of events. They're going places, you know, she's the new bride, and people are inviting them everywhere, and parties and social events. But about 1891, Aminda's name is like dropped off all the social lists. Like, you do not see her at all in the parties that are happening. You'll see that Martin attends. He attends with his mother-in-law. He attends with Numa. He attends with his sister-in-law. But Aminda's name is not mentioned. And, it made me wonder, like, why? What happened? And then later on, I find out that he died at only 23 years old. Oh, wow. And all the paper said is that he had a heart condition. I thought, well, maybe that's what's wrong with him. But as I started to research Aminda and Martin, I found the 1900 census, and inside the census, Aminda's living in New Jersey with a family, as a boarder. And
Did you think they were separated or divorced?
I did. Originally, I thought maybe they were separated, but because I kept reading articles that she was traveling, she's in Las Cruces, I'm like, okay, well, they're not totally separated because she keeps coming back.
Right.
Or it'll say that he went to New Jersey or he went to New York to visit them. Okay. But I see in the census that Herbert is listed as an imbecile who cannot speak or read. And so he definitely has something wrong with him. And at this point, I think he was probably about 10, maybe 8 or 9 when I read that. But Aminda was a wonderful, extraordinary mother. I think she would take him to these places, and she never stopped trying to find a cure to whatever was wrong with him. I don't know, because I've seen that he had a heart problem. I saw that he had a back injury as an infant. But I don't see, nobody says anything. They just, they mention a lot, several times in the newspaper they mention that the Lohmans are traveling to New York to look for a special school, to check out a special school for their son. And then another time she's in Missouri. She's looking, she lives in Missouri for almost a year at this osteopathic hospital. And I really don't know too much about the history of osteopathy. I don't know if you guys do, but there was a doctor there at that time named, I think his initials were like T.W. Still. His last name was S.T.I.L.L. He is considered like the father of osteopathy. And
wow.
He found out when he was really young, his father was a doctor, and he found out when he was really young that he could heal people with his hands. And I'm not talking about like the laying on of hands.
Right.
He found out that he could manipulate people's bodies and make them feel better. And he started doing that early in his young life. And he went to school and became a doctor, but he claims that during the Civil War, his school burnt down, and he lost his diploma, and the school cannot verify that he had gone to school there. So, but he still kept doing it, and other doctors got mad at him for what he was doing because they felt like he was practicing medicine without a license. So they took him to court. He went to court, and this is right before the Lohmans get to meet him, by the way. This is why I'm bringing this up. So he gets taken to court for practicing without a license, and he explains what happened to his diploma, and then he says, all these doctors here who are angry at me and bringing this suit against me, they have more patients in the cemetery than I do.
Oh, wow.
And so,
Ouch.
yeah, so he got acquitted, and he was allowed to continue his practice of osteopathy. And now today, it's one of the leading schools of osteopathy in the nation.
Wow.
In Missouri.
It's not that long ago, really.
No, really, no.
Yeah.
I feel like I have to keep this like in my head lined up right. So we're talking about Herbert. He was the child of Aminda and Martin. Aminda's the child of Jacob Schaublin. It's so interesting that, they call him an imbecile, but also, like, I think of traits that we see today, like a child who's, like, nonverbal. And I just wonder, like, was this autism? They just didn't know it.
I think you hit the nail on the head, because I have another photo of him, and this time it must have been before what did I do with that? It must have been soon before he passed away, because he looks like a young adult there, and he's wearing a watch, he's wearing a boutonniere, he's wearing glasses. I mean, you would not see anything wrong with him. He doesn't look like he's drooling at the mouth or, hanging his arms down. He looks perfectly healthy and fine. And so I think you're exactly right. I think it could have been autism, because they took him places, they traveled with him. I'm really proud of what a good mother she was, because she didn't leave him like locked in a room. She took him places. She looked for ways to cure him all the time. And like I said, a year in Missouri, and then I think she was like 5 years in New Jersey, but that's because he was going to school in New York. And it was, you probably know, like, do you know where Orange, New Jersey is?
Yeah.
So it's just like a ferry ride.
Yes.
Well, now you can take a train, I guess, but it was just a ferry ride to New York, and like 15 minutes from what I read in the paper. But she would travel back and forth, I guess, to New York and from New Jersey. So
That is a dedicated mom.
Yeah, she was. She really was.
And I would imagine at that time a lot of institutionalization happened.
That was happening all the time, and I don't believe they ever put him in an institution. Here he is. I don't think they ever put him in an institution. They put him in special schools, but they were schools to help him improve. In fact, a part of me, I need to research this more. Part of me wonders if he was at the school that Elizabeth Farrell opened up in New York. She was like the main person for special education, and she opened it up the same time that Martin and his wife were investigating a special school in New York for him. So I kind of wonder if it was her. And she's like the mother of special education. So if it was, that's just like, wow.
Probably not a surprise to find that out.
That the Martins took their child there, yeah. So.
This just brings back memories. I got to meet Temple Grandin when she came. And if you ever watched the movie, she always would talk about how important school was and how important like rules and manners were. And I think of like how good of a mom we're talking about that she was, that she made sure that he socialized and that he learned to be around people, and that she didn't hide him away, which I think is really nice.
Yeah. No, you're right. It's because back then that's what people did. I'm working on a collection right now, and it's not that long ago, but the child was born with a mental disability, and they put him in an institution, and he lived in an institution in Texas for pretty much his whole life after he was about 9, I think.
Wow.
Sad. Did they have any other children, or was this their only child?
They did. They had another child in 1894, just a few years after Herbert was born. They had a little baby girl. And I was amazed when I saw that, because I went to go to the Masonic Cemetery just to go look at the Schaublin graves. I'd been there before when I first started my research during COVID, and I saw the headstone, and I didn't bring a picture of it, but I will send it to Jacob, because when you see it, it looks like it's a headstone for Martin. It's this dome, this roll. It looks like a roll, like, you know, those chiropractic rolls that
Yeah.
it looks like one of those on a pedestal. And Martin and Aminda's name are on it pretty prominently. But across the top of it, it says Emily Bertha, child of Martin and Aminda and Lohman. And it's got her birth date and her death date, and she only lived for 2 months.
Oh.
There's nothing about her that even mentions that the Lohmans are expecting another baby. I have not been able to find anything that they've lost the baby.
Right.
And as you probably remember from the podcast with the Nelson Funeral Home records, New Mexico is not keeping death records at that time. So I doubt if I'll be able to find a record from any place. I didn't find it on Ancestry, didn't find it in Family Search. I do all this research and I cannot find it. So I hope to come across it sometime, you know.
Right.
It'd be interesting to find out what happened to her.
Wow, 2 months
sad.
old. Yeah.
Yeah.
They had a rough life.
They did. And I know that that the family, the descendants, when I talked to them, they said, oh, I don't think they were very happily married. I think they had there was trouble in the marriage because of her not being able to have a child. And I don't think that was the case. I think it was exactly the opposite. I think that made them stronger, actually. I do. I think when your family goes through that kind of trauma and that stigma, that it either tears you apart, right, or it brings you closer. And I think in their case, it brought them closer. And I know that Aminda traveled a lot to be away with her son, and Martin did with his business. But throughout that, you know, I want to say maybe 15 years that I really focused on, he was always traveling to New York to see her, or Missouri to see her. Right. And I think she came back too. It would say, you know, Mrs. Lohman is in town, you know, visiting her family, and you know, we'll be here for a while, or we'll be here for the summer, you know.
Right.
So we knew she was gone, but she was coming back.
Right.
You know, fairly frequently.
That makes me happy. That makes my heart happy.
Me too.
So let's see, what else do you want to tell us about them?
Well, so the Schaublins, as you know, he had rheumatism, and he had it really bad. And I'm not really sure if Martin also developed that. I'm not sure what happened to Martin. I know in like 1903 he's coming back from Albuquerque, and he's in his buggy, and he's traveling with somebody, the initials are J.S. Garcia, and he's traveling with him, and he falls in his buggy. They fall, and they crash. I forget what happens, but they crash. And from 1903, you see that Martin is ill. They're like, oh, he's not feeling well today. So I don't know how bad his injuries were. It said that they were both injured. You know, it did say that, but didn't say how injured. But I don't know if that kind of, like, maybe he injured something internally, and it's always just continued to get bad. But he didn't live a long time. He lived till he was 57 when he died. So I think Aminda was 77 when she passed away. So she lived quite a long time without him afterwards. But so when they traveled a lot with the Schaublins to different hot springs. They go to Hudson Hot Springs, which we know it today as, is it Fayette Springs by Silver City?
Faywood?
Faywood, thank you.
Oh,
thank you.
my favorite place.
Well, you have been swimming in the waters of Jacob Schaublin. Because that water never gets old. So, but Jacob with his rheumatism, they go to Faywood Hot Springs quite a bit. And they also go to a town in Mexico called Santa Rosalia, Mexico, near the Baja, and which I'd never heard of, but and it surprises me that I didn't hear it, because they have curanderas there, they have healers there, and they also have the healing waters there. And so Jacob and Mrs. Schaublin, Bertha, they go to this town at least twice that I've seen newspaper articles, and almost back to back, because when they go back the second time, they take their son Jacob Jr., who also is sick. So I'm not sure what's happening with everybody, that their bodies are so. And well, I know malaria was an issue at that time. Consumption was a problem, and so was tuberculosis. So we have those three like major illnesses happening during that time period. So it could have been either one of those or all of them for them. But they end up in Mexico, and they take Jacob with them. But eventually, Martin gets pretty bad. He gets pretty sick, and they end up going to Mineral Springs. And so before I get into Mineral Springs, I want to back up just a little bit, because we talked about Aminda getting married on September 18th. So September also was like a cruel month for that family, because September and December, because September 18th, I believe, is the day that Bertha Schaublin died. And it just right now struck me when you said September 18th. I was like, I'm pretty sure that's the day that Bertha passed away. I know it was September. So I think, but I'm fairly certain it was the 18th. Jacob dies in September also. I mean, not all the same year, but, that seems like September's not a good month for them.
It's funny how that happens.
Yes. Yeah. So anyway, so Martin is not doing well. He's having all kinds of health issues, and they're traveling to hot springs also. They even go to the hot springs in Santa Rosalia with the Schaublins also. So 3 times they're there. And so it must have done some good, because, the Schaublins kept going back. If you try something, it doesn't work, why would you go back?
Right.
So especially for that amount of travel. But the hot springs are the big thing at the time. Everybody needs to go get healing. There's big stories about it. In fact, one of the little pictures I brought you is a big ad that was in the paper. And this was actually right after Martin died, but it's not uncommon to have seen that in the paper all the time. And that was a full-page ad in the paper for Mineral Hot Springs, and they talked about the healing and all the things that it cured: rheumatism, malaria, like any kind of disease you could think of that was happening at the time, or even minor things. It was cured through Mineral Hot Springs. And so there's a town called Mineral Hot Springs, and that town, it started kind of around the same time Las Cruces did, I think, but there was a judge who bought some property, and his last name was Lynch. He bought this property, and he decided that, I'm going to build my homestead here. And his wife had really bad rheumatism, and they found out that bathing in that water helped her. It really helped her, and so they started to drink it, and they felt better like year round. And so they started telling people about it, and pretty soon everybody wanted to come to their spring and their well and drink from it. And so this town, Mineral Wells, got a little bit bigger, and there was a woman who everyone thought she was crazy. She had what they now are saying that she had dementia. At that time was what she had, but they didn't call it back then. They just said she was crazy. And so she was drinking water from that well every day and bathing, and she was cured of her dementia.
Wow.
And so that right there is what boomed that town. That town, like a railroad got built there. People were, I don't know how they made water crystals, but they made crystals out of the water. So they must have laid it somewhere in the sun and had it dry, because how do you dehydrate water, right? But they did something and made crystals, and so they were selling the crystals, mailing it to people. And
Is it just like salt? Were they just thinking?
it must have just been like salt, I mean, I couldn't find any pictures of it. I was really interested in how are they selling these water crystals, these mineral crystals. I wonder if they were just scraping the sediment off the wall or something, but people were buying it. I mean, it was a big business. But the day that Jacob's funeral announcement comes in the paper, which is, by the way, September 18th, I do know that, September 18th, his funeral announcement is in the paper. I want to say he died earlier, like maybe a week before, but his announcement's in the paper. Right next to that article, there's an article for mineral wells.
Wow.
And that talks about this preacher from Alamogordo traveling with his father-in-law and his wife, and they're going to mineral wells to get healed. And so here's a preacher, what do preachers do? They help heal people, right? But he's going to mineral wells, and he's taking his dad to mineral wells. And I wondered if that's what sparked an interest in Martin to go there, if he saw it right next to that announcement.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, these companies were sending it out to newspapers in big ads and half-sheet ads, and so it's possible he'd seen it before. It's possible he visited before. I don't know, but I found it really interesting that right next to Jacob's death announcement, there is another article, not an advertisement, but an article about somebody traveling for healing.
Wow.
And that healing that people did, it was pretty. It's not like now when we think about resorts, but they started opening up resorts there, and most of them were like small little pavilions that people stayed at, but there was a couple of nice fancy ones, and one of them was called the Hexagon Hotel. And it is
I've seen this.
So lovely. And I've even seen the inside. The man who designed that, his daughter has the design of the inside of the building and how it was made, and it's very unusual. It's not there anymore. I actually did get to go to mineral wells. My husband,
you did?
We were traveling. My husband's such a good man. People always ask me, does he love history as much as you? And I'm like, no, but he loves me. And so he takes me to these places that I want to see and go to. And that was one of the places I wanted to see was mineral wells. And we were traveling I want to say we were traveling from Austin. And so we made a little side tour to go to mineral wells and check it out. And
So it's near Austin?
it's not too far away from Austin. I want to say about 40 minutes from Austin. It's close to Weatherford because my brother lives in Weatherford, and we traveled from Weatherford. We were in Weatherford. We kind of went a little zigzag, but we were in Weatherford, and then we went to but it's only maybe 15, 20 minutes from Weatherford. Okay. Not far, but it's a little side road. You've got to go out of your way.
It's still a little town, so it has...
It's still small. They celebrate their crazy water because that's what they called their well, was crazy water, and that's what they caught.
Wow.
Crazy water.
Did you sip from it?
I did, and I brought you each a bottle.
Oh, so nice.
You each get a bottle, and it's the water is determined by if it's like high sediment, like high minerals, low, medium, and extra high. So I brought some for my coworkers, and they're labeled 1, 2, 3, 4. So number 4 has the most minerals, and that's for the craziest people. So I drink 3 bottles a day. But there's a 2, there's a 1. I couldn't find any of the 1s, so sorry, but I have 2, 3s, and 4s to choose from.
That's about right. Yeah. That's about right for us.
That's about the right level. So, well, I was going to mention that. So at these at this resort, I'm not 100% sure where Martin and Aminda stayed. I'm presuming it would have been there because it was the only one with electricity. It was the only one that had the bathhouses inside the hotel instead of having to go out to a well or. So with the kind of lifestyle that they lived, I'm sure that's where they stayed.
They would have picked that.
And it wasn't too far away from where the Masonic Lodge was also. And when Martin goes to the mineral wells, he goes about 5 days before he dies. And he's very sick. And he and Aminda go, and he dies while he's at mineral wells.
Wow.
Yeah. And
that's sad.
Yes, it was very sad. That's like really sad. I felt like when I was reading this information, I get chills right now thinking about when I read this information. I felt like I got to the part of the book where your favorite character died, because, I had read in the newspaper that they were going and they were traveling, and I knew that he had died in mineral wells, but I didn't realize that he died 5 days after he got there on this trip that he went specifically like for healing, not just for relaxing, but for healing.
Right.
So we're, again, not sure what caused his death. You know, 57 years old, that he was so feeble that he could barely walk, actually, to the train. So Aminda has a friend that she's sometimes called, this Mary Carson. She's sometimes called the niece of Martin or Aminda. And I haven't been able to find any familiar relationship through like ancestry of how she's related to them, but she's noted as their niece quite a bit in articles. And she was actually the niece of the woman who owned the house that Aminda boarded at when Herbert was attending school in New York, and they were in New Jersey. She became friends with this young lady, Mary, and so I think she just said, hey, you know what, you're such a good friend and such a good helper, why don't you come back to New Mexico with me? Because she ends up in New Mexico and she stays here in New Mexico. Wow. But when Martin dies, she gets a telegram and she goes to meet Aminda at Mineral Wells to help bring his body back. And a member of the Elks Lodge there in Mineral Wells and a member of the Masonic Lodge also travel with the body back. I mean, it's their brotherhood, so I'm assuming that's kind of a standard thing. So they traveled with the body back to Las Cruces.
How sad. What year was that?
He died in 1912. 1912.
Okay.
No, 1911. I'm sorry. It was before we became a state. 1911.
The year we became a state.
Right before.
Yeah, right before. He didn't get to see that. Here he was involved in politics, and he didn't get to see that.
Speaking of, what office did he hold?
So he was a sheriff.
Okay.
And I don't have the dates exactly on all of them, but I'll let you know that he was a sheriff. Yeah. He was a board of regents at the college, one of the first. In fact, when Jacob got off being a board of regent, because he wasn't on very long, like maybe a month or two, and then he was off. But Martin became a board of regent. Cool. So he was a sheriff, board of regent. He was school superintendent. And then he was our very first mayor of Las Cruces.
Wow. First mayor of Las Cruces.
And Las Cruces, or Lohman Street, is named after him. I think we talked about that at one point, So, Lohman Street is named after him, and that's right where his house was at one time, right on Lohman Street, and across from the convent, very close to the Schaublins' property. And so he had a lot of different offices that he held, and he held them quite proudly. I think sometimes in the papers, depending on which paper you read, you'll see that there's different stories about Martin. There's an article that's actually just, it's handwritten, but it's supposedly came from a newspaper. I haven't been able to find it, but it's notes from one of our historians named Catherine Stowe's. We have her papers in the archives, and she writes that that Martin liked to put people in jail that he would find at night. This is when he was a sheriff. He liked to put people in jail, and he would, and you guys don't get him in trouble because you work for the county. So this is just between us. So he calls them, or the historian calls them bums. He takes these bums off the train and off the streets, and he puts them in the jail. And then he sends them home before breakfast, or he lets them out before breakfast, and then he charges the county for their breakfast, which was 75 cents. So he charges the county for that.
So. Get a nice breakfast. That's good. That's sweet.
75 cents
on the breakfast. Why not?
Coffee and a biscuit, but they don't even get it. So, but he charges the county for it, and but I haven't been able to find that in the newspaper. But there's a lot of things I don't find in the newspaper, and I find out later. So
well, keep us posted on that breakfast.
I will, because I want to know how much he owes you guys.
Probably a few cents.
So one of the things, since I'm bringing up about this, the things that I've discovered after I've been researching, on my last podcast, I mentioned something about Jacob Schaublin's family saying that the Cochise, the Native Americans told the Schaublins to leave San Pedro, Arizona, and that's what brought them to Las Cruces. I hadn't been able to find any newspaper articles about a skirmish going on with the Indians at that time, and I I came across a book, and I'm always like astounded at the things that I find, but I came across a book in our special collections, and it's a story, it's a diary of a young girl, and I believe you had one of her descendants on as a guest. Did you have Elias Day, one of his descendants? He was a farmer. It seems like the guy that did Chile.
Oh, maybe,
Travis
yeah.
Day.
Travis?
Yes, Travis. Okay, so I believe she was his maybe great aunt, and she wrote a diary as a little girl. Chickens Don't Turn to Dust, and it was written in 1969, and she's only, I want to say she's like 8 or 9 when she's writing this journal, and her dad tells her to draw, like if she doesn't understand something or how to say it, then to draw it. And she can't spell very well. You know, she says she hates election day because her family is damn Democrats, because everybody was Republican back then except for them, and you know, she wants her dad to change, and she just writes the cutest little entries into her diary. And one of the things that she writes about is that she asked Mrs. Schaublin why they moved here and from Arizona, and Mrs. Schaublin tells them that the Indians told them that they were going to die if they didn't move.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
And she tells them the whole story, just like I've heard, like the descendants of Jacob Schaublin kind of mentioned to me, like, oh, he was a friend of Koshi's and he had to leave. They told him to leave so they could be safe. And, you know, you hear about these family lore stories and you kind of wonder, like, how much of that
is true.
Okay,
yeah.
well, now I heard it from Ruth Day. That was her name before she became Ruth Johns Liesel. So, but it was Ruth Day, and she's just really darling in her book. And I've been trying to find a copy of this book for myself because I loved it so much. It was like late night reading, you know, just wanting to stay up all night long and read it. But we have this in our special collections, and we also do have a copy that circulates, that checks out. I already turned mine back in, so I don't have it. So I had to borrow our special collections one. But it's really cute. You can see the way that she spells the names. And I have all these little bookmarks in there for different reasons, because I found a lot about what happened in Las Cruces, verifying it through her. And, you know, she lived during that time. She lived during Jacob Schaublin's time. She lived before the state became a state, you know, when it was still a territory.
So when did she decide to publish this?
She published it in 1969, and I don't know how old she was then because there's no photo of her. In fact, she doesn't even mention that. Like when you read, you know how they always tell a little bit about the author? She doesn't mention that her last name was Day as a child. She doesn't mention, but she mentions her mom and dad. And then something in here says the Day family sometimes lives, you know, but she doesn't say my dad, or she doesn't say her name is Ruth Day, blah, 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 you know, all these other names. But she does mention her name's Day in the book, but you have to read the book to know that. And but she's really cute. She talks about a lot of different things that happened in Las Cruces, and I think this should be on Oprah's best-selling list. I really do, but I'm going to just...
Cute. How cool.
Bern, you think you can find us a copy?
But
I think I'd have to.
I found two copies on eBay.
Oh, see, I think we can find one, Bern.
Oh, excellent.
I haven't bought mine yet.
I want to create a nice little library. We have so many guests on who write such interesting books, and I want to have
We could have a
library
collection
for us. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Can have it on the corner somewhere in the podcast room.
Yeah.
Cool.
I love
would be
that
cool.
she wrote that book and she didn't correct her spelling. Like she writes election ELKSUN, you know.
Close enough.
She misspells the Schaublin's name, which they're used to it because their name's always misspelled. That she's discovered.
We
They
had to
would have
spell
been
check it
used
a
to
few
it.
times during
Yeah.
the first podcast.
Yeah, so but she writes a lot of really cute little things about getting in
cute.
trouble. She writes one time that like some man picks her up on the street, you know, and takes her shopping and buys her all these little goody things, and she skips school. She's going to the Loretto Academy. She skips school to just hang out with this grown man, and her dad finds her and like, probably wants to spank her, you know, but tell her like, you don't walk off with these people. They knew him, but still, she had no business skipping school being with this man. So
Wasn't Loretto also run by the nuns?
yes,
Oh, I bet she got paddled for that.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, but because Sister Praxedes, she even mentioned Sister Praxedes calls her dad. That's how her dad knew.
Oh, wow.
But I did want to correct that. So, because I said, I wasn't sure if that had happened in the Schaublin storyline or not, because like I say, with family lore, you never know
just
what's
don't
the
know.
truth. But
Yeah.
I kind of feel like, when it's in a primary source like this, where somebody actually heard it from Mrs. Schaublin herself, who was the person who was told to leave that
Right.
area, her and her husband, I feel like that's definitely a fact now. that
Right.
I will.
Right.
How cool.
That's been
Very
fact checked
cool.
by
Yeah.
a 9-year-old girl.
This is very cool. I
Sometimes
love
the younger
this.
ones know all the tea, you know?
Yeah.
You know, they do.
Oh,
They hear
well,
everything.
Yeah.
I'm not
They
kidding you.
hear
That
it
girl's
all.
got tea in there about everybody. She
All
does.
the chisme.
Yeah, she does. She's
was
got
reading
some
some of
good.
it. How
Yeah, she's got
cool.
some good
I
stories.
find
in there.
diaries fascinating.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've. I love Alan Rickman, who is an actor.
Oh, yeah.
He's a famous actor. He's done lots. He did Harry Potter. He did what is it, Sense and Sensibility.
He wasn't in Law and Order. He was in,
No.
but he was in another.
He's done lots of good
Yeah.
stuff. But he had passed away. But he did. His wife ended up, or his partner ended up, publishing his diaries and excerpts from his diaries. And so he would have like actual written diary, but then he would also do these really beautiful drawings. And I mean color pencil type of things.
Oh, yeah.
And so, but it's decades of his diaries that.
Wow.
I know, it's just so fascinating
Yeah.
to me that people have I don't know, kind of talked about their life and they just
Right.
have it. I think it's just really fascinating.
We all think that my life isn't that interesting. I don't need to keep a diary. But so many things that we find out in people's writings in the archives. And thanks for giving a plug for keeping diaries and journals. That we find that those to be the best source to find out what's happening and what happened in Las Cruces
can
in the
see
past,
that.
what happened in
Yeah.
Mesilla, what happened in Arizona, as we get these diaries and we see that somebody wrote about the weather, and they write about, somebody's cart tipping over and, breaking a leg, and then you find out that's why that guy was that way, why he limped, and, nobody ever knew why, but in
Right.
somebody's journal, we
There
found
it
out
is.
why he tipped over in a cart,
Wow.
So, yeah, so that's, everybody should keep a journal.
Yeah.
I
Yes, we're gonna
got
plug
rid of
journals
mine a long
today.
time ago from middle school. You didn't need to hear about those.
So anything else you want to tell us about? I want to ask you, what do you love about the Schaublin story? And why do you think you're drawn to it?
I don't know, honestly. I don't know. My kids always know that I have 3 adult children, and they all know the story of Jacob Schaublin, and they know the story of Aminda. When I saw the book, I don't know why. I felt like it was almost like destiny to open that up. I felt like Jacob Schaublin's name had to be told, his story had to be told, his family had to be recognized for his contributions to our community. I felt like Aminda's story of being a wonderful, kind mom and just never giving up on her child, like moms are, but it's rare to read about it and be so struck by it and not even know that person, because I don't,
Right.
don't know nothing about him. I had to find the descendants. I had to know more. My oldest daughter, excuse me, I'm getting verklempt. So, my oldest daughter, she went with me to California, and when I was in California, I said, hey, we're not that far away from where Aminda and Martin are buried. And so my husband was with us too, and so he says, oh, okay, let's go. So we went to Glendale, California, to look at the cemetery, and the people there are really good. They have a really wonderful, I think I brought the map. Oh, I did. Okay, good. I was like, I think I brought the map. Sorry, I keep banging things. They have a really good map of the cemetery, and it's one of the oldest cemeteries in California. All the movie stars are buried there. Even Michael Jackson is buried
Is this
there.
the cemetery where they do the movies on the side of the walls, and
Yes.
you get to sit in the cemetery and watch the movies?
Wow.
I've always wanted to do that.
Oh, it's a beautiful cemetery. It's like a city. It's like a city of dead people. When you look at it, it's just beautiful art everywhere, sculptures, flowers, headstones. Aminda, where it's kind of yellow, Aminda and Martin are buried in the oldest part of the cemetery. And when Aminda, going back a little bit, when Herbert dies, she has him buried there first because they're living in California. And according to the newspaper, she'd been living there about 2 years. Martin has already passed away by the time Herbert dies. And she decides they're going to bury him in California. And so she has Martin's body disinterred here. He was buried in the Masonic cemetery here. Okay. She has his body disinterred and taken to that that cemetery by train. And she buries them side by side. And she buys a plot for herself right next to it. So when my daughter takes me there to go see my husband took me, but my daughter was with us, and she was helping us find it because they have this neat little thing that they give visitors, and it has a QR code, and you can look up how to find anybody in that cemetery. If you're interested in a movie star or anybody, you can find them so easily in this cemetery, which I loved.
Is there an admission fee?
It's not. It's free.
Wow.
You drive in. They have like a little gate there, and you can stop and tell them what you're looking for, and they'll give you this, which is what they did for me. They gave me this. We stopped at the little gate, and they handed that to us. And he said, I can draw you a map where it's at, but you can also scan your QR code. I'm like, no, draw me a map. And so I thought he was just going to draw, but he handed me that and, had it highlighted where it was at. And we found it right away. My husband found it. He's always finding things in the cemeteries for me, but when we were...
What a romantic relationship.
Oh, yeah. He's really good. So, when I do, search for families in the cemeteries that we visit, he's always the one who finds them.
Wow.
He's way better at it than I am. Because I get too involved in the stories on the headstones. I'm like, wow, this kid
I'll be there all
died.
day.
Yeah, I could. But he's on a mission to get us out. But when we're there at the cemetery, my daughter, she's like, Mom, I want you to find them. We can't leave. And I said, well, I because we had some place to be. We were on a schedule. And so she was helping look. We kind of spread out in that area and to see if we could find it. And, of course, my husband finds it. And Martin and Aminda and Herbert are buried under a beautiful magnolia tree. And I took a picture, and I didn't bring it, but I might send it to you guys anyways. But I'm putting a magnolia where Aminda's headstone should be. She doesn't have a headstone. She does not have a headstone, and that to me is it was so heartbreaking to see that she did not have a headstone. Martin has a nice brass headstone. I believe it's surrounded by a cement frame, and exactly like Herbert's. But she has no headstone. So you wouldn't even know she was there.
Wow.
Yeah. So my daughter, she made arrangements for me to have a magnolia from one of the trees. And I put it there where her headstone should be. And she took a picture of me doing that. So,
very nice.
Yeah. So, but it was a very surreal moment to be there in that spot where she was buried because, as I mentioned in my podcast with the Nelson funeral home records, where the Nelsons had their funeral home, that building once was a home of Martin and Aminda Lohman.
Wow.
Yes, and so ironically, or maybe through destiny, maybe she always knew she was going to do that. The Nelsons are the ones who buried her, or not buried her, but serviced her and had her funeral, prepared her for burial. It was the Nelsons who did that. Wow. And her funeral was there. And so can you imagine what it would have been like for her friends who knew her, being entertained in her home and visiting her, and then going to that same building for her funeral.
Right.
Yeah. It must have been something. I can't imagine what that was like for people who were there at that time. I don't know if it was a big funeral. There's not a lot of details about it other than that she had died. And the Nelsons took care of the body. Wow. And they, her friend Mary Carson from New Jersey, she ends up, like I said, staying here and being her lifelong friend. She even marries, I believe, a member of the Masonic Lodge, and he had 5 kids. So in her obituary, it says that she never had children, but she had 5 stepchildren. She helped raise 5 stepchildren. I cannot find anything too much more about her other than
Right.
that. But she's the one who finds Aminda's body and is the one who, I forget the term, but it's the one who lets the coroner or the police or whoever know that a body is ready to be picked up. So, but it's
Wow.
her who notifies the coroner. So I was glad to see that they were friends till the very end.
Right.
Yeah.
When are you going to write a book about this?
You know, you're probably like the third person who's asked me, because I have like stacks and I have like 4 jump drives of information, you know, just I have to. I feel like I have to do something for Jacob Schaublin. And there's more to the story. I mean, this is just like kind of like the middle of the story, because their son, Emil, not their son, but Emily's son, Emily and Cable. I want to make sure I say his name right because I've been saying it wrong. But Emily and Cable's son was named Emil, and he became an orphan at 5. And there was this big struggle between his step-uncle and Jacob Schaublin to be his guardian. And apparently there was a little bit of money left, and the Schaublins felt like they didn't need the money. They were quite well off. But they felt like this other person who was trying to take control of, he was an attorney, so I don't think he needed the money either, but he wanted control of Emil, and he wanted to have guardianship. So there was like a 2-year-long court battle over
Wow.
who was going to have
So who ended up
guardianship.
getting
The
guardianship?
Schaublins did. They raised
They
him, and according to the family, they say that he didn't speak English. He only spoke Spanish and German until he was about 8 or 9 years old,
Wow.
because that's all he ever spoke at
Heard.
home and
Yeah.
heard. Yeah, so he had to learn English on top of, you know, so. When Aminda passes away, Henry is still alive. That's another Schaublin brother, but on a lot of different accounts, I see that he may have had a problem with alcohol, and so he probably wasn't a good. I shouldn't say he wasn't a good. He probably was not the best person to be in charge of like estates and.
Right.
So when Aminda dies, Emil is the one who handles like the probate. And I was really interested in when you had the people from the probate here, because I wanted to hear like, so what kind of a process was that for him to go and take ownership of her things? Because I don't believe she died with the will. I didn't see any notes, and I haven't really checked your records yet, but I don't see. It looked like everything had to go through probate, and so it looked like it was kind of a struggle maybe for him to get some stuff. But he did end up selling the city a significant piece of property here in Las Cruces.
And that property today?
That property today, and you know, he sold it. What they said was like a very, very large, they said in the paper, it said it was almost like a donation. He sold it so cheap.
So cheaply, yeah.
Mhm. So that building, when he sold it, the city was putting in I don't think it was a bond levy, but it was, I believe it was a bond, but they were trying to build a new hospital here in Las Cruces. And so they decided that that would be the perfect place. It was kind of in the center of town. And so that's what they did. They built a hospital on the property that Emil sold them so cheaply. And do you see it there?
I do.
The white building in the
The
middle?
center.
Which is, I believe, now the Cervantes building.
Oh, thank you. I was trying to figure out what it was.
Yeah,
Because
so-
I know it was the city of Las Cruces for a little while.
So there's the old courthouse, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
There's the Amador Hotel.
Yep. You got it.
Yeah, now it's the Cervantes Medical building,
Cervantes Medical.
which is La Clínica de Familia runs it.
Okay.
Oh,
That's what Dennis told me. He says, I think La Clinica is there. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just to come full circle, that hospital celebrated its 75th anniversary this year. And Dennis collaborated with us and others to get information, and I have some of the deeds here.
Oh.
I
So,
love it, Bern. You
yeah.
always get us good stuff.
And credit to Elizabeth Villa
Via.
for the photos
This is a
from
great
MNSU.
picture. This is a really cool picture because it's showing us a lot of downtown and a lot that we've talked about on this podcast. So this is also Loretto, which is the school, which was run by the nuns, which is now in a lot. But next to it, I mean, the Armijo house is still there, which is where the Greater
Right.
Chamber is now. And then right here would be where Citizens Bank is.
Right.
And then that's where Peter Piper is now.
Landmark. You can have that photo if you want it.
I might frame that. That one's pretty good in my office too.
She always likes the photos, so that I can tell when her eyes light up. That one's for you, Caroline.
Do you want to see?
Yeah.
Check it out.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
So tell us about
Yes,
these deeds.
yeah. What'd you find,
I'm
Bern?
Oh, the
interested.
deeds.
Yeah.
The deeds,
I haven't seen that.
working their way back, I have one granted to La Clinica de Familia. We've got a deed that says, it's highlighted here, the said purpose shall be used for any other purpose than a city, county, hospital. They shall revert it back to the city of Las Cruces. So it could not be used again for a general hospital. So that's kind of cool.
I guess that's right, because it's not technically a hospital now. Now it's like doctor's offices, and yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I have the original deed, the description of a tract of land to be used between Emil Conway as a separate property to the city of Las Cruces, Doña Ana County, New Mexico. So there it is, yeah.
Very cool.
In 1948.
Thank you so much, Teddie, for coming and joining us again. We always have great episodes with you.
Always.
Yes, thank you. And I hope you write a book, and I hope that we get to keep talking about the Schaublin family.
Thank you.
Because I think you're right. Like, the story's barely getting started. Like, what they did for Las Cruces with starting New Mexico State, with being him, Martin was the first mayor of Las Cruces. So I think there's just a lot more of the story to tell that we can kind of venture off into. And it's interesting how sometimes all these podcasts tie into each other and we have
They
no
do.
idea. Yeah, and like, we did not plan that, folks.
No.
We did not plan it. It just kind of happened. But I think that's the fun part about being a historian. And so, anyways, that's it for today. Be sure to follow us on social media. Be sure to like our podcast. You can hear it wherever you get your podcast: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Libsyn, iHeartRadio podcasts. Be sure to check out our TikTok. We're posting lots of videos now, our Instagram, our Blue Sky, our Facebook account. And I want to go ahead and thank Teddie, of course, for joining us today. I want to thank Bern, our researcher extraordinaire, who brings these stories to life for us as well. Also, Cynthia Mendoza, our communications coordinator. And of course, Jacob behind camera. We don't get any of this done without Jacob. So thank you all so much. My name is Caroline Zamora, and I'm the Chief Deputy County Clerk, and we'll see you next time.